Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm just attempting to go live on Facebook and Instagram together for the first time. Awesome. Okay. Hi, guys. Welcome to 4 lifestyle factors that increase our feelings of hunger. So if you see my face kind of darting back and forth from phone to computer, from screen to screen, it's because I'm talking to you on Facebook and on Instagram today, which is really exciting. So if you are just seeing this pop up, this is going to be a chat all about hunger. And hi you guys. Oh, hi everyone. So nice to see you. Thanks for joining. So how this works is I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm going to cover. And if you have questions, you can feel free to type them in. I might not get to them right away as I'm chatting if I'm on a specific train of thought, but I will see them on the screen and they'll stay there, so I'll be able to go back and answer them at the end, which is probably going to be in about 10 to 15 minutes. That will be enough time to cover everything that I want to discuss today. So how this all came about, this chat, is because on social media a couple weeks ago, I noticed a picture someone reposted of Kim Kardashian advertising her appetite suppressant lollipops. And I thought, oh my gosh, is this really where we are at in society, that we need to have a food to suppress our appetite? And so I think the biggest thing that I thought about when I saw these appetite suppressant lollipops being advertised is, holy crap, we need to learn a lot more about our hunger. We need to understand it a lot more deeply. And it's actually not that complicated. So today I hope to give you lots of tools to be able to read and understand your hunger cues a little bit better, so that you don't feel like hunger is a scary thing, or you don't feel like you need to suppress your hunger, because your hunger is a signal, and it's a piece of communication that your body has with you to try to tell you what it needs or what's going on. The tough thing is that it's not always about food, and we're going to get into that when we talk about the difference between physical and emotional hunger. So that's why I wanted to talk to you guys today. I don't want you to be afraid of your appetite. I don't want you to be afraid of hunger. I just want you to get to know your hunger a little bit more, and to be able to read the nuances that your hunger is often bringing with it, so that you can make decisions appropriately and feed your hunger in a way that works really well for your health and your overall wellness. That's emotionally, mentally, and physically. So that's really where we're going to start, which is the difference between physical and emotional hunger. So lots of times when people feel the feeling of hunger, we immediately think we need to eat food. And that's often the case, but it's not always the case. So the difference is, physical hunger builds slowly, right? So we might be feeling a little like pangs of hunger, and then 10 to 20 minutes later we feel a bit more hunger, and then 10 minutes after that the hunger is growing, right? So that's a slow, steady build in the feelings of hunger. We feel physical hunger in our stomach. That's kind of like that spacious feeling, or that growly feeling, or that empty feeling. And we also feel like physical hunger can be fulfilled or fed with lots of different types of food. So if we're truly physically hungry, we tend to be able to fulfill that hunger with a few different things, right? Like there might be 5 or 6 different meals or different snacks that would fulfill that hunger really nicely. On the other hand, we have emotional hunger. So emotional hunger is more felt in our head. It's kind of like a craving, not always, but it doesn't always feel like a craving. And it usually comes on really quickly, like I'm hungry right away, or I need to eat something right away. And it's usually felt like we want a specific food or taste, like I want something sweet, or I want something salty. So that emotional hunger, it often really feels like a physical request, right? Like we're asking for something, an actual type of food. Usually the best way to decipher between physical and emotional hunger is, how long does it take to build the hunger? If it's kind of a slow build, tends to be more physical hunger. If it's kind of a longer build, tends to be more emotional hunger. And the thing is, with physical hunger, is mainly affected by this hormone that we have, a neuropeptide called ghrelin, and it's produced in your stomach. And basically what it does is, when that stomach is empty, ghrelin is increased, and it sends signals to your brain and it says, I'm hungry, give me food. And that's that spacious kind of growling feeling. So once we get into these 4 lifestyle factors that increase our feelings of hunger, I'm going to talk about ghrelin again, because there are a couple things that we do in our lifestyle that can increase ghrelin. So sometimes we feel more hungry than we actually truly are because of some of the lifestyle factors we have, sleep and exercise. So I'll come back to that. But first I want to finish talking about emotional hunger, because that's usually the thing that people get most excited about or most terrified about. I'm not sure the difference. So the thing is, there's nothing inherently wrong with emotional hunger. I think we're afraid to almost admit that we experience or feel emotional hunger from time to time, and we all feel it, right? It's that feeling that I want, ice cream right away, or I want chocolate right away, or I want sugar right away, or I want something salty right away. And it's very normal for this to happen. And the thing is, when it's emotional hunger, and we're getting to the point now that you guys are learning the difference between physical hunger and emotional hunger. When we're getting to that place of knowing the difference, oh crap, this is emotional hunger that I'm feeling. It's more of a craving. I just ate an hour ago. I'm not actually hungry. I'm actually bored, or I'm actually looking for stress reduction, or I'm actually feeling some uncomfortable emotions coming up, or I'm looking for comfort. And the funny thing with emotions is if there's uncomfortable emotions coming up, and we're trying to bury them, whether with food or with avoidance or all sorts of different things that we do to avoid feeling uncomfortable emotions, it's kind of like holding a balloon underwater, right? So if you've ever tried to hold a blown up balloon underwater, it's really hard, right? The more you push down, the more the balloon kind of wants to pop up. And trying to mask our emotions with food, and I've done it, we've all done it probably multiple times before, it gets harder, and that balloon wants to come back up to the surface with a vengeance and with more power the more that we push it down. So I think that the biggest thing that I want you guys to take away from today, if anything, is that using food as a tool to bury emotional hunger isn't a great long-term strategy. It's kind of always going to come back to bite us later on, usually with more of a vengeance than it is a short-term type of strategy. So if it's the type of thing that we're having a long, stressful day, and then we're coming home and we're feeling like we're super worn out and we're searching for food, even after dinner, and we're doing kind of that continuous meal and snacking into the evening, is it actually that we're looking for stress reduction? Is it actually that we're looking for some type of comfort? So one of my favorite tools for this is to look at the different types of senses, because obviously when we're eating, one of the main senses that we're fulfilling is taste. There's obviously smell and sight and all those sorts of things. But what other types of things can you do to find comfort other than food? So one of my favorite things is heat. So those bean bags that you heat up in the microwave? I'll get those and I'll put them on my neck, put them on my stomach, put them on my feet. Maybe watch something on TV, read a book, listen to a podcast, that sort of thing. So I'm getting some comfort for my senses that aren't always relying on hunger or food, right? The other sort of thing that you can do if you identify that it's really comfort that you're craving, when those emotional hunger pangs start to come up and you're thinking like, okay, this is totally emotional hunger. This is what she was talking about. So what am I supposed to do now? And you identify that you're looking for comfort. What sorts of things are comforting to you? How about going outside, getting fresh air? How about talking to a friend on the phone that you haven't talked to in a long time? How about having a really good conversation with someone that's close to you? Watching something funny? Like there's a million other things other than food. I think sometimes we just reach for food because it's the easiest one, right? We don't have to pick up a phone and call someone. We don't have to be vulnerable. We don't have to, seek out another solution. So sometimes food seems like the easiest solution, but as a long-term strategy, it's actually not that helpful, right? Because those emotions are going to keep coming up over and over again if we don't address them properly or in a healthy way. So I think the really important thing when it comes to emotional hunger is to not feel bad about it and not feel like you're the only one and not feel like you're doing things wrong or like you are being unhealthy. it's really normal to feel emotional hunger, and it's really normal to reach for food as comfort, because sometimes food is really comforting. That's why there's a whole, distinction of types of foods called comfort foods, because lots of times food reminds us of our youth, or there's really, really tasty things that do provide some elements of comfort. So I don't think that I want you to take away from this chat that food and comfort can't go hand in hand. What I'm trying to say is food and comfort don't always need to go hand in hand. So if we're always reaching for food to comfort ourselves, is that the best strategy? Maybe if we're reaching for food to comfort ourselves like 10% of the time or 20% of the time, we're going to have better outcomes for our health and our body composition, if that's what we're looking for. So before we move into these 4 lifestyle habits that increase our hunger, I want to give you a quick little tool that I call my 3-step process for reacting and responding to hunger. So if we are looking to react and respond to our hunger differently than we are currently doing, I've got 3 steps for you. The first thing is to feel it, feel that hunger, and determine if it's physical or if it's emotional, right? So are we feeling it in the stomach? Is it coming on really quickly, emotional hunger, or is it building slowly, physical hunger? Could this hunger be satisfied with a few different types of food, physical hunger? Is it a craving for one specific type of food? Probably more emotional type of hunger. So figure out the difference between the two, feel it, and identify it. Step 2, feed the hunger appropriately. So if it is physical hunger that you're feeling, reach for something that's preferably high in protein and fiber, something that's going to really fill you up so that you're not going to feel more physical hunger really quickly. It's going to last for, 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 hours of physical fullness. If it is emotional hunger, feed that hunger appropriately. Maybe 10 to 20% of that time, it is reaching for a comfort food. Maybe the other 80% of the time, it's finding those other comforting, positive, stress-reducing activities that you can do, like talking to a loved one, going to counseling if it's something that's a little bit harder to deal with your loved ones, going outside, getting fresh air, reading a book, listening to a podcast, having a hot bath, all of those other sorts of sensory inputs that can be really comforting for you that aren't necessarily food-based. And then the third step for reading and responding to your hunger powerfully is be okay with the way that you chose to feed your hunger. So you identified if the hunger was physical or emotional. You fed the hunger appropriately based on your goals, based on what is best for you at this point in time. And then you're going to be okay with that. And this is the reason why this step 3 is really important. If we are experiencing emotional hunger, we figure out, yep, this is a bout of emotional hunger that's coming up for me. Then we feed it appropriately, which 10 to 20% of the time is with a comfort food. And then step 3, we end up feeling bad about the way that we chose to feed our hunger. That kind of defeats the purpose. We want this to be an empowering process. We want this to be the type of process that we can use day in and day out that's going to help us to make better food decisions. So if we have shame, if we're feeling shame about the food decisions that we're making, research shows that we tend to continue this binge and restrict cycle. So we tend to make not as great food choices. We tend to overeat more frequently if we're feeling shame about the food choices that we're making. So I wish the answer was as easy as just remove the shame. Obviously, us talking about it here, bringing it to the surface, and us having a conversation that we all do this on some level, some of us more than others for sure, is helping to decrease those levels of shame we might feel with the type of food that we're eating, right? Or the type of ways that we're responding to the emotional hunger that we might be experiencing. So that's why this step 3 is really important. Being okay with the way that you chose to feed your physical or emotional hunger and not beating yourself up for it and staying in this conversation. So now it's time for us to move on to these 4 lifestyle factors that increase our feelings of hunger. So this is really important because in my experience, when I'm working with clients and they're feeling a lot of hunger throughout the day, it's really challenging to make really great decisions about food in the morning and at night and all day long if we're feeling really, really hungry quite regularly. So if those levels of hunger, physical hunger and emotional hunger are through the roof, are there specific lifestyle factors that we can shift or change so that we end up experiencing less hunger overall. And we don't want to be afraid of hunger, but we just want to make the distinction that being super, super hungry all the time means that we're going to be having to make more decisions about food. And this is why we tend to find that it's easier to make really good decisions about food in the early morning or early parts of the day. It's because we've got tons of mental energy. Usually we're coming off a night of hopefully decent sleep. So it's easier to make good food decisions at breakfast or snack or lunchtime. And then usually kind of the train falls off in the afternoon and evening. That tends to be when we snack more, tends to be when we do like, oh, what the heck sort of idea with food. And it's because of this idea called decision fatigue. So our body and our brain can only make a certain amount of decisions in the day before the quality of those decisions kind of starts to go downhill. So if we're experiencing a lot of hunger because of different lifestyle factors that we're about to get to in about 1 minute, how can we tweak those lifestyle factors so that we're experiencing less hunger? Because if we're experiencing less hunger overall, we don't have to make as many decisions about food. Then we end up making better decisions about food. And you can see how this would be a feed-forward cycle. So the first lifestyle factor that often affects or increases the amount of hunger that we might be feeling is the type of exercise that we do. So if you're doing lots of cardio, say training for a marathon, that sort of thing, you're probably going to feel a lot more hunger than if you're doing, weight training 3 times a week. If you're doing really, really high intensity exercise 5 or 6 days a week, you're probably going to feel a lot more hunger than if you're doing, 1 to 2 days of high intensity exercise, a couple days of yoga, a couple days of weight training. I'm certainly not saying that high intensity exercise or training for a marathon are bad things. I've done both of them. They're great. I love them both. However, they have affected my hunger significantly. So remember at the very beginning of this chat when I told you about that hormone called ghrelin, it's produced in your stomach. If we're doing lots of cardio or lots of high intensity exercise, we produce more ghrelin. It tells our body that we're more hungry and we feel that physical hunger cue a lot more often. This doesn't mean that we don't train for a marathon or we don't do high intensity exercise. It just means that if we are going to engage in those forms of exercise, we know that more hunger is going to come with that. And we know that we're going to have to make more decisions about food. And we know that we're going to have to be armed with healthier foods in our fridge and that sort of thing, or else we run into this pattern of being more hungry and then also not eating really well as well. So exercise definitely increases our hunger. Certain types of exercise definitely increase the amount of hunger that we feel. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just need to be aware of it and then act in accordance to the hunger that we're feeling, right? So if I decide, next year that I'm going to train for a marathon, you better know that I'm going to be expecting to feel more hunger and I'm going to be arming myself with lots of really great strategies to eat better, like doing more food prep, like making sure that I've got lots of really healthy meals packed and prepped in the freezer, that sort of thing. But if I'm interested in experiencing a little bit less hunger, I'm going to tweak my exercise schedule so that I'm not going to experience as much hunger. For me, where I'm at in life right now, which is like parenting, running a business, and obviously doing some exercise, that's exactly where I'm at. So I do 30-minute workouts, usually strength training based, sometimes a little bit of high intensity intervals, maybe once, maybe twice a week, and some yoga and then walking. And for me right now, that means that my hunger cues and my hunger levels are pretty balanced. Obviously, my husband, for example, is an athlete. He's in a huge training block right now. So for him, hunger is increasing because training is increasing, and that's, of course, something that he's going to continue doing. He's not going to decrease his training because he's increased hunger, because of, obviously, his specific goals. But for me, I'm not training for anything specifically right now, and I enjoy having balanced levels of hunger so that I'm not having to make decisions about food all the time. I'd rather spend more of my decision-making power on good parenting and working on my business, of course. So factor number 2, lifestyle factor number 2 that can increase our feelings of hunger is our sleep habits. So if we're consistently getting broken sleep or less than 6 hours of sleep per night, we'll release more ghrelin. Remember, that's that hormone that your stomach produces. If you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep per night, your body's going to increase production of ghrelin because you're not getting enough restful sleep and you're needing more food to actually keep going. This can be really frustrating if you have a new baby because you're obviously not getting 6 hours of steady sleep. I don't think you are. If you're caring for a loved one or an elderly person or an aging parent or someone who's sick, your sleep might be broken because you might be needing to get up and help them through the night. Or if you're a shift worker, that would be another reason why you might not be getting 6 hours or more of sleep, or why your sleep might be broken. So the big goal here is, if it's possible in your life right now to get 8 hours of sleep per night, awesome, that's great. 9 would be awesome too. But if you are in one of those phases of life that I just discussed, where you might be getting more broken sleep, maybe you're going through menopause, caring for a baby, or caring for an aging parent that is breaking up your sleep, try to accumulate 60 hours of sleep per week. So even if it is broken up, obviously that's not the cream of the crop and the best sort of thing that we're looking for, but if we can accumulate, through naps or getting back to sleep or going to bed a little bit earlier, 60 hours of sleep per week, that is like super uber awesome, and that will help to decrease your feelings of hunger. So habit number 3 that increases, lifestyle habit number 3 that increases our levels of hunger is the type of food we eat. So if we're eating foods that are relatively unprocessed, have a lot of protein, have a lot of fiber, have a lot of healthy fats, I'm going to give you another hormone name coming up real quick here. All of those types of foods stimulate CCK, which is a hormone that's released from your small intestine, and it suppresses hunger. So basically, ghrelin, that hormone that's produced in your stomach, if your stomach is empty and has been empty for a while, if you're doing lots of exercise, or if you're not getting a ton of sleep, ghrelin production is going to be increased. It tells you that you're hungry, you're more likely to eat to fulfill that physical hunger feeling that you're feeling. Then the food travels into your small intestine. If it's protein and fiber fat packed, or there's a fair amount of good healthy fats in there too, your body's going to release the CCK, and this is going to suppress that hunger. So this is why the types of food that we eat really do affect the amount of hunger that we eat. If we're having lots of, salmon and chicken breasts and chickpeas and black beans and fiber-packed foods like carrots and cabbage and kale and all those sorts of things that have protein and fiber in them, we're going to release that CCK from our small intestine, and we're going to have that hunger suppressant sort of action. So if we're eating, a lot of more refined carbohydrates, super starchy carbohydrates that don't release that CCK as much, then we're going to have these signals telling us that we are still hungry. So that's why the certain types of food that you eat do affect your levels of hunger, and it's really important to remember. Another food that affects our hunger is caffeine. So caffeine is a short-term appetite suppressant. So in the short term, you might notice if you wake up in the morning, you're a bit hungry and you have a coffee, it suppresses your appetite for a little bit of time. The thing with caffeine is that it is a short-term appetite suppressant, not a long-term appetite suppressant, so we tend to get that kind of hunger with a vengeance coming back later in the day, maybe after lunch, in the early evening sort of time. So if you're doing, coffee as your breakfast, and then you're feeling tons of hunger come back in the afternoon, sometimes that's why. The caffeine suppresses your appetite in the short term, and then the hunger comes back in the long term. So pairing your morning coffee with a breakfast that's protein and fiber packed. For me yesterday, it was some scrambled eggs with kale and some leftover salmon. This morning, I'm trying to remember what we had this morning. Some more scrambled eggs and some berries. That's what Sloan and I ate. It covers that protein and fiber base. I had coffee with it. And then I'm not going to get that hunger coming back with a vengeance later. So lifestyle factor number 4 that increases our feelings of hunger is water. So it is true, lots of times if you feel like you're hungry and you are actually thirsty, drink some water and it's going to make a difference. Oftentimes we perceive the body signal of thirst as hunger. So if we're drinking less than 2 liters of plain water per day, we want to try to increase that level back up to 2 liters, because that can help to decrease the feelings of hunger that we might be feeling. So quick recap here, guys. Those 4 lifestyle factors that increase the levels of hunger, our levels of hunger, are type of amount of or amount of exercise we do. So if we're doing lots of cardio, lots of high intensity exercise, it's great. I love those types of exercise, but they bring along with it more hunger. It doesn't mean that you don't need to do those forms of exercise, but it does mean that if you are engaging in high intensity exercise or marathon training or training for a big bike ride like the Ride to Conquer Cancer or something, you better be armed with lots of really awesome food choices because you are going to be more hungry. If you're looking to balance your hunger and you want to shift the types of exercise that you're doing, maybe moving to shorter workouts like 30 minutes or less, 1 or 2 days of high intensity interval training instead of 3, 4, or 5, some slow walks in there, all those sorts of things. Lifestyle factor number 2 that increases our levels of hunger was our sleep habits. So if we're getting 6 or less hours of sleep per night, we're going to increase the amount of ghrelin that our stomach releases. That tells us that we're more hungry. All that you need to do here is, if you're in a stage of life that doesn't facilitate a lot of sleep, new baby time, caring for an elderly person or an aging parent or a sick person or in menopause, just do your best to try to accumulate 60 hours of sleep. Sometimes that's just not doable, and you have to embrace that that's going to be that phase of life, but it also might be a reason why you might be feeling more hunger. And then if you're not at one of those phases of life and you're just staying up late watching TV and you're a night owl like me, then trying to accumulate those 60 hours of sleep is really going to help to decrease the amounts of hunger that you're feeling. Third lifestyle factor that increases our levels of hunger is the type of food we eat. Trying to get mostly unprocessed sources of protein, fiber, and fat helps us to release that CCK hormone from our small intestine. It's a hunger suppressant. It's going to keep us fuller for longer. So making sure that we're choosing all of those protein, fiber, and fat-packed meals. If you need examples of those, you can scroll through my Instagram or Facebook or head to my website, blastfitness.ca, and there are tons and tons of recipes and food ideas there that meet all of those sorts of guidelines. And then finally, lifestyle habit number 4 is water. Making sure that we're drinking at least 2 liters of plain water per day will help to decrease the amount of hunger that we are feeling. Or if we're not drinking 2 liters of water per day, adding that in, and that, because that could be one of the reasons why we're having a lot of hunger feelings. So I hope that this was helpful for you guys. I hope that you're not going to fear your hunger and that you're going to be able to read your hunger cues a little bit more appropriately. If you just joined on, this will stay live on Instagram and Facebook for 24 hours. I'll get it up on my YouTube channel as well, so you can refer back to it there if you want to watch from the beginning. We talked about the difference between emotional and physical hunger, how to respond differently to make sure that if we are feeling pangs of emotional hunger, which we all do, to use my 3-step process of reading, responding, and reacting effectively. So making sure we know the difference between physical and emotional hunger, feeding that hunger appropriately, and then owning the decision that we make about how we choose to feed that hunger. All right, guys. I didn't see any questions come up here. I'm just going to scroll through them real quick. Oh, Jan Hudek came on and said that this chat was making him hungry. That makes sense. Talking about hunger. Going to scroll through on Facebook. Someone said, I'm seeing some questions come up here. Gonna check this out. Do you have an idea for replacing sugar and creamer in your coffee? And someone mentioned you should use coconut sugar or unsweetened almond milk. That's awesome. I do black coffee, and that's how I like it. Sometimes I'll just do cream. And for me, it's a really satisfying thing to have. I've never really been a sugar in my coffee sort of person. So my honest suggestion, I don't love the taste of stevia or any of those like sugar replacements. If you can give up the sugar in your coffee, great. It's going to be tough for the first week or so, but it's the type of thing that if you're going to have sugar in your coffee, if you're pairing that coffee with a breakfast that's protein and fiber packed, the effects of that sugar on your insulin is not going to be as pronounced. So I'm not going to tell you not to have sugar in your coffee, because I think that you can still be really healthy and do that. If you want to have more natural sources of coconut sugar, that sort of thing, go for it. But obviously the best option would be to just go with black coffee or to just cut the sugar out altogether. Yeah, okay. Really good questions, guys. And I will see you soon. Talk to you soon, guys. Bye.